Welcome back to Let's Chat Football and welcome back to Let's Chat Premier League. I got 6 results out of 10 right last week, lads. Not bad, but I think what's most important that for me with this channel and what I'm trying to build is that I'm looking at the key battles on the pitch, the players that I identify, and looking if the game plays out actually the way that I expect. So let's see what game week 2 has in store. We're going to get straight into it, starting with Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest, the early kickoff at 12:30 on Saturday. I think it was a good point for Iriola last week. You know, Newcastle, yeah, it's a different Newcastle side, that many expect to, maybe drop off the season. But I think going away on the first game, St. James's Park, and getting the result, a last minute Bosley penalty. Given that context, I think that's a good point. Liverpool, though, they will have some concerns from that result against Newcastle. They looked very open there through the middle. A couple of times they got caught high up the pitch, and Newcastle looked like they had so much space to just run through the centre of Liverpool's midfield. Van Dijk, I think, he's going to take a lot of the responsibility for the poor goals they conceded against Newcastle. I think he could, anticipate the danger a bit more. He could be organising the team a bit more. I think, especially with that first goal they conceded with Elanga, it's clear as day that Kirkes was never going to recover there in time. So could he block that passing lane out, or maybe engage Asula before he makes the pass? I think he could be doing better there. But I think he needs more protection. He needs more protection in front of him. I don't think you could expect Liverpool to be defending well when they're so open like that. And I think Forest will look to take advantage of those central spaces, whether it be Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he looked quite promising last week against Leeds, but can he maybe take advantage of those central spaces being there, and can he drive at the ball and carry Forest forward? Does Iriola make some adjustments there? I think the Liverpool fans, they really rate Trey Nioni. So I'm interested to see, does maybe he come in this game, just to add a little bit more protection to that back four. I think he had a good pre-season as well. So yeah, I think maybe he could come in. I think Iriola, he'd love a win with his first game at Anfield, first competitive game at Anfield, but I think he's up against a Forest side here that are really good on and off the ball with this wing-back system. So I'm thinking that they can frustrate Liverpool here, so I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. The next game is Bournemouth versus Everton. I'm really interested to see Bournemouth in this one, because I think this is going to be a completely different test to what they had last week against City. We spoke last week with Bournemouth, and I discussed that they could potentially go a bit more direct this season. I think it played out in the game against City. That the first goal that Bournemouth got with Evan Nielsen done brilliantly to disjoint the City defence, and then he whips a great ball in to get the assist. I backed Bournemouth last week to get the job done, but I think what they did do, if anything, was give City a scare, and maybe on another day, they could have gone on and got the win. But I think that's something that Bournemouth, maybe the fans might have to adjust to this season, is a different approach when they do take the lead in games. I think under Iriola, it was very much die by the sword. We'd go for another goal, whereas against City, I think what happened was they kind of defended, they dropped a bit deeper, maybe too soon, invited City on them. And yeah, I think inevitably City, they ended up getting the job done on them. But I think there's positives to take for Bournemouth. They pressed City quite well in this match against Everton. Will Everton even allow them to, press well? I think Everton, they're a team that don't really like to take much risk at the back. With Tarkowski, Pickford, they'll happily just go long up to Beto, up to Barry, and try and, win the second balls and try and compete in that aspect. I'd be looking at Tarkowski, O'Brien, Keane, Brantwaite, whoever starts there at the back to, deal with the physicality and the more kind of direct nature of Bournemouth if they are to go down that route. I'm looking at Truffert, the left back. Can he have that license to join the attack and get high up the pitch for Bournemouth? And can he test the new right back for Everton with Roll filling in that position, I think he's more of a natural midfielder? Does Jacob Bryan maybe come back in? I know they're thinking of possibly selling him, but does he come back into the team? I'm also interested though to see from Everton's point of view what David Moyes does in the midfield, because I think fair play to Moyes last week. He's shown faith in young 19-year-old Harrison Armstrong, and he played him next to the new signing that they had, the Championship Player of the Season last year, Hayden Hackney. And I think he reaped the benefits of playing that. I think both midfielders looked really good on the day. Harrison Armstrong getting an assist. I think what's so evident though with Bournemouth, what they need to fix up is their set piece defending, especially their corner defending. I mean, against City, Mark Gahey, he found himself free twice there with no marker on him at all. I'm looking at Bournemouth here, and I'm looking at Marco Rose and what he wants to instill with this team. I'm looking at the rotations, the passing combinations. That's what I'm banking on this match, that they'll just create enough opportunities to take down an Everton team here. So I'm going for Bournemouth 2, Everton 0. The next match is Coventry versus Hull City. And, two promoted teams in this one, and two teams that had contrasting opening games, but I think you'd be foolish to, judge both teams after just one game. I think Coventry, they had the toughest opening game, playing the champions away on a Friday night. What would concern me from the match against Arsenal was just how open Coventry looked though. They didn't really deploy a low block, and Lampard didn't look to kind of be overly pragmatic in the game, which would concern me moving forward. If you're going to go to the champions and be open, I think you're kind of, you're kind of looking for trouble there. I'm predicting them to be a bit more on the front foot in this match. So does maybe a Hammer come back into the midfield? I think he used to play for Coventry before. And I think he could be important for Coventry this season. I think if Coventry are going to stay up, they're going to need goals from midfield, and he's very important at that. When you're looking at these two teams, they actually played each other twice last year in the Championship, both 0-0 draws. So Hull are clearly a team that can frustrate, as we saw last week against Man United as well. I think Hull, they must be just on cloud nine. I think winning last week in the manner that they did, like, they fully deserved to beat Man United. Giles and Coyle were, as wing backs, were just flying forward at every opportunity. You had McBurney, who was holding the ball up. He was linking the play. He was, creating chances up the line. Despite Hull's dominance, both of their goals did come from set pieces. So, I'd fully expect Lampard's Coventry to kind of, be a bit more prepared for that. So I think Coventry here, they've waited 25 years for a Premier League home game, and I'm predicting the players to put on a bit of a show for those fans and get them optimistic for the season, that, their season starts now. So I'm going for Coventry 3, Hull City 0. Next up, we have Tottenham versus Newcastle, the 5:30 game on the Saturday. And, I think it's fair to say with Spurs that they had a disastrous first game against Brentford. It's quite hard to kind of, judge De Zerbi yet, because he needs his players available to him to be able to implement his methods, and Porro was out, Van de Ven was out, Adoji didn't play. They're missing Odegaard, they're missing Kulusevski, he's a mystery absentee. Xavi Simons is coming back from an ACL. Maddison, he's not really capable of playing 90 minutes anymore, and I'm sure before I actually recorded this video that he's injured again. He's suspected to be out for another week and a half or 2 weeks. So I have a bit of sympathy there for De Zerbi in terms of, like, you can't expect the manager to kind of implement his ideas perfectly when he doesn't have the personnel available to him. The problem there, though, is that, like, will he ever actually have the personnel available to him and in peak fitness? It might just be a case that you just have to get on with it, that, Spurs are never going to be able to field a team with, all of these players fit and ready. The goals, regardless, that they conceded against Brentford just weren't good enough. Bergvall, he's going to take a lot of heat. He wasn't the only one. I think Kinski didn't really, cover himself in any glory. I think he did well last year to, help keep Spurs up. But ultimately, there's still a question mark over him and whether, he can perform over like a season consistently. Van Heck, he looked really poor. Same with Senesi, same with Robertson. So like I think it's not been the best of starts for Tottenham, but I think he'll be looking there, De Zerbi, to get his players back for this Newcastle game. I think there's a change in Newcastle this year. I think they might just have to grow accustomed that they're going to have to sit in a bit more and look to transition and look to counter attack. And do you know what? With this group of players, it could suit them. Do you know, when you're looking at the counter attack, what they had against Liverpool with Elanga, Osula, Wissa, driving forward on the break. I'm going to be interested to see how it fares in this matchup against Tottenham. I would expect that Tottenham will have, a bit more defensive solidity in them in terms of like their midfield structure and their rest defense. I think Spurs, look, they're going to have to be more creative at home. I think the signing of Savinho, I think Marmoush is on his way. I'm not sure if he's registered yet. These are going to make big differences to what De Zerbi wants to do. Making a prediction with Spurs, at the moment, and not knowing who's going to be available, who's going to be injured, who is going to actually start. It's so hard to predict Spurs games. I'm going to go for Tottenham 2, Newcastle 1, but that's heavily dependent on Van de Ven and Porro being back in the team. Next up, we have Leeds versus Brentford. Leeds are going to come into this game full of confidence. They got that goal late against Forest, the free kick from Stack. I think there's a case for Stack being the best free kick specialist in the league. His catalogue is growing more and more, and he tends to come up with moments of magic from dead ball situations. Leeds, I think, against Forest, they did have to ride their luck at times. I think they lost a couple of aerial duels there to Forest, and they could have paid for it with Forest hitting the post. I think Brentford will definitely look to exploit that, because they're a very kind of aerially dominant team. I think that there's, a good chance that this game could come down to an aerial duel won or lost on either side of the pitch. Brentford couldn't have asked for a better start, against Tottenham. Their new signing, Sangare, looks the real deal. So I'm looking at him in this match, to follow it up against a more physical, a more kind of robust Leeds team that are going to bring the intensity with, their first home game at Elland Road. I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely brilliant in this game. I think, though, with Brentford, I just see a team that has a lot of steady heads, and I think that this game could become quite chaotic at times. But when I'm looking there at it, like Jensen, Janelt, Yarmulke, I think they're just experienced to deal with that type of pressure. So I'm going to go for Leeds 1, Brentford 1. The next game is Sunderland versus Fulham. I think Sunderland will be looking to bounce back from, the manner of their defeat last week against Ipswich, the poor goals that they conceded. They very unlike Sunderland from, what we're used to seeing from Sunderland from last season. You look at the first goal, O'Nien giving the ball away, Ballard selling himself, then with the late winner that they ended up conceding to Jack Clark, their former player, Alderete giving the ball away again cheaply. I'm fully expecting them in this one to fix up those errors. I'm looking at Brobby, though, in this one to get on the score sheet. I think he had a couple of chances last week against Ipswich, but he looked kind of like he was a little bit rusty, that kind of opening game rust. He got into great areas there, but he was just very kind of slow to get his shot away. So I'm looking for a bit of conviction from him in this match. And I'm looking at his battle with Calvin Bassey. You've got two absolute, like, huge human beings there, huge players that, are going to be contesting in this one. Fulham are a very interesting team. Looking at them against Chelsea, I thought they were very good going forward, but I felt like they were so open defensively. I think people will look at Fulham this season and looking at, them losing a Harry Wilson, losing a Raul Jimenez, which are, of course, hugely important players to lose, and they're goal scorers that are hard to replace. But for me, it's the midfield that, I'm looking at it, like losing a Lukic, who I think had that bit of steel in the middle. I just don't see, like, when I look at the team sheet and what they played against Chelsea, a midfield of Berg, King and Iwobi, like, that just doesn't scream solidity to me. They did press Chelsea well, but they even forced Chelsea into, some errors at the back there. Colwell getting caught. But I think like when that press is beaten, like there's just no rest defense for Fulham. Like Fulham, I actually fully expect them to have the ball in this one. I think that Sunderland will surrender some of the possession, but I feel like that'll play into Sunderland's hands. I think Sunderland are better when they're under transition. I could just imagine Granit Xhaka in this one, regaining the possession from deep, picking his head up, looking, who have I got on the counter attack? Who have I got, for the transition, for the counter ball, playing a Bobby early, and I think they can get some joy there. So I'm going to go Sunderland 2, Fulham 0. Next up, we have Crystal Palace versus Man City. I think Crystal Palace, to be honest with you, I think they can take some positives from that game against Everton. Not the result, of course, but I think the overall performance was good. I think, really they created chances in the match. They had opportunities. In Nketiah, squandering a couple of chances. Mateta the same. But I think it's a positive that, they created opportunities than, not having chances at all. What was interesting, though, from Palace was there was kind of a contrast between the first half and the second half under their new manager, Saj. I think the first half looked very similar to what they were doing under Glasner. There was a lot more kind of, fast passes between Wharton and Kamada, looking to attack with pace, but I think in the second half what we saw was a bit more of a slower build up from Palace. They took their time in possession a bit more, and that's something that Saj is clearly, he's trying to implement that, so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. I think that will take time for Palace to adjust to, the style that Saj wants to implement, and I'm particularly interested to see how the crowd reacts to this style. So I think that could be important too. If Palace are like taking their time at the back a bit more with passes, if they're kind of maybe overplaying a small bit and taking the extra pass, moving through the thirds, how are they going to react to that? Mark Gahey, he was deployed in midfield. I'm going to be interested to see how Maresca uses him in this match. Does he put him there again? And is that something that Man City fans want to see in the future? Ultimately, though, Man City, they relied on Turkey to come on and change the game. So I'm interested to see the team news in this match. Does Foden keep his place, or does Turkey come in instead of him? Can Maresca get both of them into the same team? I'm interested, though, in this one, in the battle down City's left against Crystal Palace's right. Obviously for Crystal Palace, Daniel Munoz is such an attacking threat down that right-hand side. So I'm wondering, does Maresca maybe make adjustments down that side? Does he maybe change the personnel there? O'Reilly is usually the left back, but maybe a Gavardiol comes across there just to deal with that threat. I think Palace, I think they will cause City some problems, but I feel like this game could be like a similar one to last week, with the Bournemouth game, that City just got the job done, get the 3 points and move on. So I'm going to go for Crystal Palace 1, Man City 2. Next up, we have Man United versus Ipswich. I thought Man United were very sloppy last week against Hull. I think just, they didn't match Hull's physicality, which was the most important thing. But they were just very sloppy with poor touches, overhit passes, underhit passes. I spoke about, last week that Carrick, he's trying to implement this new style, going from a counter-attacking team into a more kind of possession dominance kind of style. So I'm going to be interested to see in this match how that plans out, because how is, that possession going to be turned into chances, particularly against teams that are going to sit in and deploy low blocks when the spaces are quite tight. So I'm going to be looking at those Man United forward players, Bruno Fernandes, Cunha, and Mbeumo, whoever starts, looking at the combinations between them, looking at the rotations against a well-organised Ipswich defence. Are United just going to be limited to playing around the defence of Ipswich? So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I think Enciso, from what I saw last week, he's going to be a huge player for Ipswich this season. I think, they're going to need him to be. He has that Premier League experience. He's got a bit of magic in him. He's got a bit of quality. And yeah, I think he's got that like South American tenacity in him as well, that you need in the league. So I'm looking at him to have a big season. Tielemans really struggled last week against Hull, but this game you suspect would suit him a lot more, where they're going to have a lot more possession in the final third and hopefully be able to kind of, sustain the attacks a bit more. But if Kobbie Mainoo came into the team, I wouldn't be surprised either, whether it be from the start or off the bench. I think he brings a bit more kind of dynamism to the Man United midfield. I think Ipswich will create chances, but I think that this new look United team, I'm looking at them to create more opportunities here, and I think that they'll have too much quality in the forward areas. So I'm going to go Man United 2, Ipswich 1. The last game is Aston Villa versus Arsenal at Villa Park on the Monday night. Villa last week against Brighton, they got thumped, and I think it was something that I predicted before, and you could just see it coming, and you looked at the team sheets and you look at the team that Villa put out, it looked pretty damning, to be honest with you. They were seriously depleted, they're waiting for new players to come in. I called Brighton to aggressively press them, and you saw that with the first goal. Like, it was just so poor. Like, Villa had a throw-in pretty much close to the halfway line, and it goes back to Pau Torres. And when Pau Torres looks up and he's in possession, like, he's pinned in there. And in the fourth goal, then again, like, geez, they got pressed there into oblivion there, Villa. And like Joe Gomez, he gets dispossessed, loses the ball, and that press pays off for Brighton. But Joe Gomez then loses the head, like, and he gets sent off, and he's going to be a big miss, I think, for Villa in this game, because Villa are already light in the midfield. They'll be hoping that new signing Goretzka will be registered in time to play Arsenal. There's just a lot of uncertainties at Villa at the moment, and there's a lot of kind of certainties around Arsenal, I feel, at the moment, But I think, like, we're not going to pretend here that this is going to be an easy game for Arsenal. It's Villa Park, the champions are coming to town. I think the two teams have played each other in recent years, and there's a bit more kind of spice to the fixture. So I fully expect Villa to put up a fight in this one, a better fight than last week anyway. But Arsenal do look in the groove, they do look prepared. I think, Lewis Skelly again in the middle, Rice in the middle. I like that dynamic between the two. I think Lewis Skelly is actually making Rice play better. We saw him, breaking lines against Coventry, something that many people said that he couldn't do, but he looked good. And I have to mention Calafiori as well. I just think when he's fit, I think he's like the best left back in the league, to be honest with you. I think what he offers Arsenal is so unique, to be honest. And I wanted to pinpoint him with the first goal that Arsenal scored. If you look here, Calafiori, he's disciplined with his positioning. When White goes to open up and play the long ball to Solis, look at Calafiori. He's on his bike. He has that license to get up and support Solis. And to be honest, it's not even the best ball to Solis. I think the defender for Coventry makes a mistake. But look where Calafiori is. He gets the loose ball and he plays a delicious ball to Havertz, and Arsenal go 1-0 up. But that goal doesn't happen if Calafiori doesn't have that freedom to get up and support, So I just think that that's something that Villa are definitely going to have to prepare for in this game, is Calafiori's underlaps. I think Villa will make Arsenal work for it, but I'm going to go Villa 1, Arsenal 3. So that's my predictions for game week 2. I'd love to hear yours in the comments, so let me know below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, because it helps support the channel, and subscribe to Let's Chat Football if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.